Let me tell you about a Tuesday night in Chicago that changed how I think about money forever. It was 11 p.m. My roommate was asleep. The city was quiet. And I was sitting at my kitchen table with a spreadsheet open, a cold cup of coffee next to me, and a calculator telling me something I didn't want to hear. At my current savings rate, I was 34, making decent money at a marketing agency. I would be working until I was 67. 60. 7. I'd read the books. I'd watched the videos. I understood compound interest, index funds, the 4% rule. I could explain the math to anyone. And yet somehow, none of it had actually moved the needle in my life. That night, I realized something uncomfortable. The problem was never information. The problem was the gap between knowing and actually doing. This video is everything I wish someone had told me that night. Not surface-level advice, the real framework. Some of it will feel uncomfortable. Good. That usually means you're hearing something you need to hear. Here's the thing nobody talks about. Before strategy, before budgets, before savings rates and investment accounts, you have to actually believe that financial freedom is possible for you specifically. Not as an abstract concept, not for people on YouTube with fancy offices, for you, with your income, your debt, your life. I didn't believe it. Not really. I said the words, but deep down I thought financial freedom was for tech founders and people who got lucky with crypto in 2017. Not for a guy from a working-class family in Cincinnati who got into marketing because he liked words. And here's what that hidden disbelief does. It makes you sabotage yourself in ways you don't even notice. You start a budget, then quietly abandon it. You open a brokerage account, deposit $200, and never touch it again. You tell yourself the strategy doesn't work for someone in your situation. The belief doesn't have to come before you start, but it has to exist somewhere inside you. The way I built it was simple. I stopped consuming billionaire content, their paths involved too much luck to be useful, and I started obsessively reading stories of ordinary people. Teachers, nurses, mid-level managers, people who went from normal salaries to financial freedom in 7 to 10 years. These stories exist. There are thousands of them. And when you immerse yourself in enough of them, something shifts. What once felt impossible starts feeling like a pattern you could follow. After about 6 months of this, working until 65 started feeling insane to me. Freedom within a decade started feeling inevitable. That shift in baseline expectation changed everything that came after. But belief alone isn't enough. You also need a reason. Because financial freedom requires doing uncomfortable things for years before you see results. Skipping dinners out, driving an older car, saying no constantly while everyone around you says yes without thinking. These sacrifices are easy for a week. They're brutal over years unless you know exactly why you're making them. For me, it was this. I did not want to spend the best years of my life doing work that drained me just to afford a lifestyle I barely had time to enjoy. That was specific enough, emotional enough, clear enough that on the hard nights, it kept me going. Write your reason down, not because it has magic properties, but because you'll need the reminder when motivation disappears. Once I had belief and a reason, I had to confront something uncomfortable about the goal itself. The traditional FIRE approach financial independence, retire early, says you need to save 25 times your annual expenses. If you spend $60,000 a year, that's $1.5 million. You invest it, live off the returns, never work again. For a lot of people, including me at the time, that number felt like a cruel joke. On my salary, even aggressive saving would take 20+ years. By the time I got there, I'd have spent the best decades of my life grinding toward a finish line that kept moving. Here's what actually changed everything for me. Retirement is the wrong goal. I know that sounds backwards, but research consistently shows that people who stop working entirely, no projects, no creative output, no contribution, often become depressed within months. The driven people who achieve early financial freedom are usually the exact people who need something to work on. So if full retirement isn't what you actually want, the math changes dramatically. Instead of asking, how do I save $1.5 million? Start asking, how much does it cost to keep me alive each month? Not your current lifestyle, not the upgraded version, The genuine baseline: housing, food, transportation, insurance. For most people, that number is far lower than they think. Maybe $3,000 a month, maybe $3,500. The moment you know that number, financial freedom transforms from a distant fantasy into a concrete target. Because now the question isn't how to accumulate a massive pile of money. The question is, how do I create income streams that cover my baseline without requiring a traditional job? That's a completely different problem, and it's solvable in years, not decades. Once I redefined the goal, I looked at my expenses completely differently. Lowering your monthly costs isn't just about saving money. Every dollar you remove from your baseline is a dollar you don't need to generate from somewhere else. It directly accelerates the timeline. Housing is where most people have the most leverage. In my case, I was renting a one-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park for $1,800 a month. Nice neighborhood, totally unnecessary. A friend of mine, David, an electrician from Portland, did something I thought was crazy at the time. He bought a small triplex with an FHA loan, put 3.5% down, moved into one unit, and rented out the other two. His tenants covered his entire mortgage. His housing cost dropped to effectively zero. I thought he was nuts. 5 years later, he was financially free at 38. I was still renting. If house hacking doesn't fit your situation, the principle still applies. Move to a lower cost of living area. Downsize. Get a roommate. None of these are glamorous. All of them accelerate the timeline. Transportation is the second place most people bleed money without realizing it. The average new car payment in 2025 is over $700 a month. Add insurance, fuel, maintenance, you're easily at $1,100 per month just to get around. I drove a 2009 Honda Accord I bought for $7,000 in cash, drove it for 4 years, sold it for $5,500. The math on that versus a car payment is genuinely shocking when you write it out. Food completes the picture: meal prep on Sundays, cooking at home most nights, cutting delivery apps except as an occasional treat. Combined with housing and transportation changes, I reduced my monthly baseline from $5,200 to just under $3,100. That single shift cut the difficulty of reaching freedom almost in half. Here's the mental shift that took me the longest to make. My job, the marketing agency, the salary, the annual review was never going to get me to financial freedom, but it could fund the thing that would. Most people look at their salary, calculate the savings rate, and despair. The numbers don't work, so they conclude freedom isn't possible at their income level. What they're missing is that the job isn't supposed to get you there. The job buys you time while you build something else. A traditional job trades time for money at a fixed rate. There's a ceiling. No matter how good you get, the upside is capped. Financial freedom requires income that can scale without requiring proportionally more of your time. I started thinking about 2 phases. Phase 1. Use job income to lower expenses, eliminate debt, build a small emergency fund, keep the lights on. Phase 2. Develop skills and income streams where your earnings are tied to the value you create, not the hours you log. The job funds Phase 1. Phase 1 buys time for Phase 2. But if you never start Phase 2, you stay in Phase 1 forever. I watched colleagues do exactly that for years without realizing it. There are only 2 types of income, and understanding the difference is everything. The first is linear income. You work, you get paid, you stop working, the money stops. Freelancing by the hour, driving for rideshare, most side hustles. The ceiling is the number of hours in a day multiplied by your rate. Even at a high rate, you can't escape the equation. The second is scalable income. You create something once that generates revenue repeatedly, or you build skills that let you charge based on outcomes rather than hours. I started a content-based business on the side, writing and eventually video, while keeping my agency job. The first 8 months generated almost nothing. But I was learning copywriting, audience building, offer creation. By month 14, it was generating $2,400 a month passively. By month 22, it had crossed my agency salary. I didn't quit until the side income had been stable for 6 months. That discipline was the difference between calculated risk and recklessness. In my experience, and from watching dozens of people try and fail to make this shift, it almost always comes down to 3 specific problems. Problem 1, I don't know what to sell. This keeps people in endless research mode. Dropshipping, affiliate marketing, coaching, courses. They consume endlessly, hoping clarity will strike. Here's the truth. There is no perfect idea. The thing you start with is almost never the thing that ultimately works. You have to begin something to discover what actually clicks. The paralysis around finding the right idea is just fear of starting, dressed up as strategic thinking. Problem 2, I don't know how to get customers. There are really only 3 ways. Create content that attracts people organically, pay for ads, or do direct outreach. That's it. Every business uses some combination of these. Most lifestyle businesses lean on content because it's free, builds trust, and compounds over time. You don't need to be the world's foremost expert. You need to be genuinely helpful to people who are a few steps behind you on a path you've already walked. Problem 3, I don't have time. This is real, but most people have more discretionary time than they think. The hours spent scrolling, watching things that don't move you forward, browsing without purpose, those hours could become the foundation of something that eventually replaces your job. Financial freedom doesn't require working 8 zero-hour weeks on a startup. It requires consistently carving out 1 focused hour a day over a long enough period. Systems beat motivation every single time. Here's the thread that connects everything. Financial freedom isn't complicated. Lower your baseline expenses, build income that scales, develop the skills that make that income grow. Stay consistent long enough for the compounding to kick in. Simple to understand, genuinely hard to execute. Not because it requires genius or luck, but because it requires doing things differently from almost everyone around you for years before the results become visible. The people who get there aren't smarter than the people who don't. They just kept going longer. That Tuesday night in Chicago, I didn't have a plan. I had a spreadsheet and a cold cup of coffee and a number I didn't want to accept. But I also made a decision that night, not to work harder at the same things, to work differently, to start phase 2. If anything in this video resonated, if you felt that gap between knowing and doing, then you already understand more than most people ever will. The only question left is what you do tonight